Hello, on this episode of the Unselects, is it the citizens and the town?
Or the citizens versus the town. I'm Greg Richards,
And I'm Brian Costello.
and we are the Unselects. Okay, Brian, tonight's episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about town meeting. Last episode, we talked about Article 9. We talked about the referendum process. Now we're going to talk about another means that citizens have to engage and make change, which is the citizens petition process. We did talk about it before. I think you're aware that I did file a petition to try to convert the planning board from an appointed board to an elected board, and that kind of stemmed from, I think it was back in episode 7 on the Tale of Two Towns, right, about the warehouses. So tonight we want to walk you through my experience going through this, through the multiple committee meetings and everything else that they put in the way to try to, I guess, help or hurt your effort to getting this to be voted on. So it was a quite interesting process. So let's go back in time and look at that episode about what we said at the time on what we could do as citizens here in Shrewsbury. Everything isn't, I say, glum, because what can we do about it? And we're going to talk about what we can do about it. Here is what the Unselects propose that we do about it in Shrewsbury. Number 1, create a citizens petition at town meeting this November to make the planning board elected instead of appointed. And that's exactly what we did.
Yeah.
And the thing to know about a citizens petition, the first step, just like the referendum, except a much, much lower threshold of signatures, is you have to get signatures, right, from other members of town, other registered voters. At a normal annual town meeting, that's the May meeting, you only need 10. So you could get 10 signatures on a specific topic or a specific issue you wanted voted on, and you can get it on the warrant. For the special town meeting like we had in November, the threshold is higher. It was 100. And we went out and we submitted 184 signatures. And then once that's submitted and it gets on the warrant, then you're invited to participate in the 2 key meetings up to town meeting. That is the finance committee meeting when they go and review and make recommendations on articles, the select board meeting, which they're doing the same, and also then presenting in front of all of town meeting, which I did run the gauntlet, let's say this year. So I do want to go back and talk a little bit about that process and my experience, because I think there's things we could do better to potentially encourage more citizens getting involved. So the first thing we're going to go back to is the finance committee and some of the comments that were made as far as after I made my presentation at the finance committee.
So, Mr. Richards, thank you for bringing forward the citizens petition. I think it's really, really valuable to have the engagement of our community and bring forward citizens petitions. I would ask in the future if some preparatory material can be provided to the board so that we can have do some pre-reading, right, other than a single line that we want changed in our charter.
Here's my argument, and I'll talk a little bit more about specifics here, but the comment, the way I took it is, I don't have to go out of my way to try to understand what you're talking about. The onus is on you to educate me on why you think this is something that we should do, right? You're on an appointed board. You chose to be there. You said that as part of that appointment, you would probably be more involved or maybe more curious about things that are going on. And you might want to read or understand that ahead of time and not really put all that onus back on the person who's presenting. Is that unrealistic for me to say, or am I?
No, I think that's a fair statement.
Okay. So my response at the finance committee, what we're going to go to now and see what I actually had said is a response, and what the chairman then said to me after my comment. So let's take a watch. One comment just because of that, and I would have been happy to do that if somebody told me to. I mean, it is one of my frustrations that you try to get involved, and I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm kind of, I don't think a lot of people in town do. We don't know all the processes and procedures if you're not that involved. And as you start getting involved, it is a little bit of a struggle. And, I didn't want to put a presentation together because I felt like just dialogue was better for this. So if I would have known you wanted some of this background information, I would have happy to present, but nobody really kind of told me to do that.
Committee
So I
generally
apologize.
get information prior to the
Yeah.
meeting, and we do our homework prior to coming
Yeah.
to this meeting.
Yeah.
So in future, I understand what you're saying, but in
Yeah.
future, it would be really great
Yeah.
if you could provide that information.
In the future, it'd be really great if you would provide the information.
Yeah.
And normally, if you go to a meeting, I mean, there's just questions I'll ask, right? Professional world, right? If you have a meeting or that you haven't been to, what do people usually tell you ahead of time?
Well, they might want the agenda, right? And they might do some pre-reading, but you need to be generally, prepared for the meeting. They give you the lay of the land. This is what we're expecting, right? I think what you experienced was, hey, I'm trying to do this, and nobody really raised their hand and said, hey, Greg, you know what? Let me show you how it's done, and let's help you out as a citizen.
Right.
Let's help you out so that you can put your best foot forward.
Yeah, so I think back and kind of relate this to, if you go to the RMV or a lot of other government things, you usually can go to a website and they say, here's what you need to bring with you. You need 3 forms of ID. It should be this.
Yeah.
Here's a checklist. Here's what you need to bring. So a lot of times you would actually provide that. And maybe there would even be a website that says, hey, if you're going to do a citizen's petition, here's the process and here's how it works. Unfortunately, in Shrewsbury, no such thing exists. In other towns, they do. I've actually found some really good documentation on other towns. I think Natick where it's like a flow chart. I mean, it's like 8 pages. It says, here's exactly what you do. First thing, step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. Really, really helpful to guide you through the process. And what I want to show here is I want to go back, and I'm going to be in full disclosure here, showing emails and my communications with the Finance Committee, because I think it's important to understand why I didn't bring certain things. And why I prepared the way I did. So what I initially did is I sent an email, right? And I said, hey, I'd like to come and speak. I was told that I would be given time at your meeting and at the November 7th meeting. So let me know how much time will be allocated to me so that I can prepare accordingly. Fair. So in response, I got a response back from the chair of the Finance Committee that says, yes, you'll be given sufficient time. The committee will address the articles, so I can't really tell you when you'll speak, but you will be given an opportunity to. And by the way, if you have slides, he's actually copying one of the assistants there, Alex, just so that she could provide them ahead of time if there would be slides. However, I decided not to do slides. So the others, he did send in then a follow-up really quick after and said, okay, by the way, however, even though I can't give you a time to start, please keep your presentation to 3 to 5 minutes. Right? Because he'd like to give time for other public comments on the matter. Now, problem I have with this is normally, if you show up at the meeting, they give you 3 minutes anyway, 3 to 5. I don't have to get on the agenda. As a lead petitioner, if you're told you get 3 to 5 minutes, how long of a presentation do you prepare for?
A fairly short presentation.
Maybe the 3 to 5 minutes you're
3
told
to
you
5
have.
minutes, right? Exactly.
So there's only so much that you can actually present in that time, and so forth and so on.
And it's too short of time if you're a petitioner to the town, in my
Exactly. Now, I went a little long.
Yeah.
In all fairness, I think I went 7. And I practiced multiple times to ensure I was respectful and try to keep it within time. Mm-hmm. My next issue is as follows. After I got done presenting at the Finance Committee in my 7 minutes, unexpectedly, the town manager, Kevin Mizikar, who we do like, came up and decided I need to make a presentation. And he actually said, I'm going to do a presentation of my own. He had PowerPoint and everything. I'm going to go to a video here, and we're going to look at the length of Kevin Mizikar's presentation, keeping in mind that I was told by the chairman of the Finance Committee I had 3 to 5 minutes. Let's take a watch. "22 minutes and 38 seconds.
Seems legit. Seems fair.
So 22 minutes and 38 seconds. All right, I do want to dwell on this for a minute, and I'm not trying, and I don't even think that they do it, and this wasn't done purposefully, or they don't even realize that they do this.
No, I guarantee, in fairness to Kevin, they told him he could do a presentation, right? Or he just decided to do a presentation.
I don't think that they told, because I talked to him
Right.
after this, and I'll show you why I talked to him after this, the next day, actually, I think. And I brought it up and I said, I don't know that you're even aware, but I asked him, I said, do you know the amount of time the finance committee chairman told me I had at the meeting? He says, no, I have no idea. I said, 3 to 5 minutes. He goes, oh. I said, do you know how long you talked at the meeting? He goes, I don't know. I go, 22 and a half minutes. I said, do you think that's fair? And he actually said no. Right? Because it's not fair. If I knew that I was going to have more time, obviously I would change the way I would do a presentation, but I just think that this is where to me, the perception is you don't want citizens to be engaged, or you're putting them at a different level. That's the thing that bothers me more. It's this whole sense of power and control where we're on a committee, we were the selected few, you're trying to engage, but you don't get the same rights, you don't get the same rules applied to you as us or the town, right? They can talk for as long as they want. They can put on a presentation for 22 minutes. We're not going to say anything. But you need to make sure you submit stuff ahead of time, do our research for us, provide us with ample information, and you only get 3 to 5 minutes to articulate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the problem, and I applaud Kevin for saying that, and I'm sure he didn't know, but I think that is a huge problem in the sense that I am taking the time to do a citizen's petition. I've gotten the number of signatures I need to get. This is important enough for me.
Right.
You had plenty of data. I've seen it. We had plenty of data on other towns with planning boards that are elected and the process that they went through and the different results with elected planning boards versus appointed planning boards. You had numbers on how many people on the planning board have been there for decades, right? And how it doesn't really end up representing the people anymore. The makeup of the planning board, I know you had a lot of data on. And so not being able to show all of that and kind of a plan, I think puts you automatically on the back burner. And it's obvious that when I had 23 minutes to discuss it and it's the town manager, how do you think the finance committee is going to vote?
Right. Well, and the other way I take this, I can't prove it, but I partially say the reason why they want the slides in advance and they want my material in advance is so that they can research and craft a dialogue around why I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's exactly.
So because if you really were open about it, and I'm just learning, like they talk about, hey, I'm just taking it in, we're trying to understand what everybody's talking about, then you can just listen to what I'm saying and make your own mind up. The problem is, I think that's the reason why you're doing it. It's like, I am going to figure out a way that I can poke holes in this. And we're going to show, as we move along here, other areas in this process in which other people in different, throughout, as I move forward in this process, they kept doing the same thing. And the reason why I'm talking about it is because I want people to be aware, because I don't know if they even see it, right, from their lens, that they can perceive that, oh, I didn't realize people perceived that was what was going on. And I think it's important for people to know.
Yeah, and even think that, the finance committee chairperson, it's the way it's always been done. There's no thought behind it. Right. There's no maliciousness behind it.
Yeah.
It's how it's done.
Yeah. So the thing I did actually like, though, about finance committee and the select board, which we're going to go to here in the clip, is it really did give me an opportunity, the way we talked about it. There was some really good open dialogue. And I do give props to both the finance committee and the select board for actually asking questions, being open-minded, having conversations in these open meetings, which we normally don't see. So I'm going to go to this clip and some of my comments I made at the select board, kind of reiterating this, and some of the other frustrations I have as far as how town meetings go, not the town meeting itself, but how committee meetings and when citizens engage with committees, how they often go and what some of my frustrations are. So let's watch this.
What you don't see in the boards is what we've seen at the Finance Committee and tonight, where residents can come up, speak, and dialogue, right? Because one of the things I know, not totally off topic, but the things that really bother me is rule, I have to know, what is it, 37? I forget, Select Board Rule 37, pursuant, you get 3 minutes, you got to send an email. Why do we put barriers up in front of residents to come speak? And even when we come speak, I get it, open meeting law, you have to be on the agenda if you want to talk about it, but it seems like there's got to be a little modern way to do things. So if we want to come and have a dialogue like this, right? If we want a dialogue like this, right, in front of the board, I think this is super healthy. And I'm not expecting everyone to agree, and I don't need everyone to agree. That's not the point, right? The point is that I'm allowed to have a varying opinion, that we can talk civilly, right, and have discourse around it and still part as friends, right? It's not personal. It's like, hey, I believe this, you believe that, let's talk about it.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I remember you doing that. I know who was clapping. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The idea that we think we have a representative and a citizen-led sort of government, but there are barriers in front of everybody. I can't get up and speak. I couldn't get up and speak at that meeting.
No, you couldn't.
And so that was the point. You were just saying, look, I get it. Maybe it slows things down. I also get that you signed up for this. This is part of the job as a select person. And citizen discussions should be vital to how we run the town. And putting those roadblocks up, I think, just impedes our ability to have good dialogue.
Yeah, and I think the point I was making too on this, I think I called it, whatever, the Rule 37.
Yeah.
I might be wrong in the number, but our select board does not leave a time open for public comment. A lot of select boards do. A lot of towns just leave a 15-minute period and says, yes, anybody who wants to come can speak. If you show up, you get 3 minutes. If you don't, not a problem. You move on to the next item. Our select board requires that you send an email, right? You have to tell them what you want to talk about. And then they can call you up and say, oh, Mr. So-and-so, you emailed us, you get your 3 minutes of time. I think that's something that should change, right? Yeah. Why not just allow people to come up? Worst case scenario is, guess what? We got 15 minutes back in our meeting. But why do that? And they say, well, we created this open office hours and so forth and so on. But to me, why not have that dialogue being shown to everybody? Because when you're meeting somebody in a conference room on the side, nobody else is privy to the conversation. You don't know what was discussed. And maybe it's something that people are interested in. I mean, it goes back to remember your parents, right? Says, I bet you the question you wanted to ask, you better raise your hand in class because probably 10 other people have the same question. If you don't ask, then how are they going to know? The same kind of thing. 15,000 people were thinking the same thing, but since you asked, now that question got on the table.
I've attended meetings at other towns and cities that had that open forum. They're great, right? There is some hilarity that happens, right? But on general rule, people have valid questions, and they're elected members of either a city council or a town council or select board are sort of put on the spot with the town manager to answer some questions. You do get the people that come up and it's the same people, but you can manage around that. I think it's more important to have an open dialogue than a closed dialogue because you're afraid of an uncomfortable conversation. Yep. Well, again, going back to the last episode, sometimes it's okay to have those uncomfortable conversations. As a matter of fact, sometimes those are the most fruitful conversations.
Yeah, I think I was making a comment in my presentation about conflict, right? Is that there was this concern that there could be conflict with two elected bodies if the representative town meeting and a planning board would be elected. And I said, well, conflict isn't a bad thing. Why do we have this viewpoint that conflict is bad? That's how you grow, and that's how you kind of have breakthroughs. And I think it's really a healthy thing to be, right, with some discussion around those types of conflicts.
Well, it goes back to, right, in the, again, 19th century, cities that had the back room, cigar smoking, bosses that made all the decisions. That solves for the people have a feeling that if they can't speak to their elected officials in an open forum, there might be something going on in the back room. I'm not saying that happens here, but I'm saying when you have that ability, when you close it off,
sure,
you're not letting the citizens speak and just get something off their chest or ask a legitimate question.
Right.
There are a lot of questions I think people would just say, I'm going to go to tonight's select board because, what about I want a speed bump on my road? What's that process? Right.
Sure.
I think it's a good thing to do.
All right, let's move forward to town meeting. And one of the things too in citizens petition is you have to actually craft a warrant article and / a motion. And it kind of has its own little format. And theoretically, and I will give the advice that if you do want to do a citizen's petition, I would recommend first step, go to the town manager. I didn't do that at the time. There was timing issues. I'm not going to get into it now, but wasn't able to do it. But I think there's people who like to use this big stick to say, I know a process and you don't, so I'm going to try to call you out and make you look silly. And I'm going to highlight that now as far as town meeting. So let's go to there and listen.
We have a motion before us tonight, which has an item, section 2.1, Planning Board, which does not appear in the warrant article. So I would kindly ask, I'm sure I'm missing something, how is this motion appropriate? I respectfully disagree. I do not feel the town meeting was properly warned of what we were going to be asked to vote on this evening because of the wording of the warrant article.
Okay, I want to talk about a few things here because this is going to tie into another clip. He mentions something. He says, I don't feel the body was properly warned. Now, pay attention to what he exactly said, because I'm going to go back to the finance committee meeting. But the guys there is the warrant, means we're warning the town meeting members of what we're going to be discussing or what's there. That's where that term comes from. Now, Mr. LeBeau was a select board member for a long time in town, right? And he's still in the 300th anniversary committee. So he's been around a lot. He knows the process, right? But he was very well prepared. And I kind of question, where does that comment come from? Did he come up with that in his own, or was that part of, something else? And I don't know that for sure. But the problem I have, I think we've talked about it, is when you think about the perception, and we'll go back to the finance committee, I kind of question, is there this backroom dialogue going on? And let's take a listen to what Mr. Mizikar said at the finance committee about the similar thing.
I think this article fails to properly warn and call upon town meeting to take the necessary actions to change how the planning board is selected in Shrewsbury.
So he did say that this fails to warn properly because of how this thing was crafted. And he said he had some concerns about the way that I had done the warrant article. And in that finance committee meeting, a town meeting member did stand up and ask a question. So we're gonna go to that now and see how that dialogue went.
Are there any recommended amendments that the town manager could supply to you and also to the residents or to the town meeting members through you first, because it's important? Are there any amendments that would clean that up, suggested amendments that would clean that up and help the residents through that process?
I'm more than willing to meet with the lead petitioner to, help support a warrant motion to be crafted that would include it. I don't think it would be effective if you did it. My opinion.
So I did meet with him, because he asked, hey, I'd be more than happy to meet with him. So I met with him. He did help. We crafted a motion that was more complete. One of the things that Mr. LeBeau said that, there was a section 2.1 in the printed motion of the evening that did not appear in the warrant article, and that for some reason, right, was this big malfeasance of that couldn't understand how they could vote on that because it wasn't clear or something like that. I mean, that was kind of the implication. Like, it was converting from a pointed board to an elected board.
Yeah, pretty easy to understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to go to an example of another article to show this compare and contrast about when it's the town doing it, no problems. When it's the citizens, totally wrong.
Yeah.
So let's look at Article 8. And I know that people are going to say, well, you don't understand the nuances of this. I get there's nuances, but let's just look at it. So let's put that common sense lens on and say, come on. So this is Article 8, as printed. This is what went out. It's one sentence. To see if the town will vote to amend the personnel bylaw or take any action in relation thereto. That is the entire article, right? Then, if you look at what the motion is 20 pages.
Yeah.
So how is that properly warning? It's okay if the town puts 20 pages behind it, properly warning. I add one paragraph. I can't understand what's going on.
And I remember that from town meeting, attending it. It was, I don't know, like an hour. It seemed like an hour-long presentation.
I mean, they're reading the whole. We're talking about like the benefits packages levels. Like there's Plan C, or 3 or 4. So that's the part that, to me, when I'm sitting there and I'm saying, I was getting really heated. I'll be honest, standing up there, because I just felt like this is why people don't get involved.
Yeah. Because
they know this is the experience it's going to be. It's like the good old boys club. You're not in the club. You can't participate. You don't get to play. Sorry. And I just don't think that's right. And I just have to bring this stuff up to show that, if you don't realize you're doing it and you're a member of, town, or you've been around for a while, just take a step back and say, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And I'm going to go here to how I did respond to Mr. LeBeau, because I think it's important to kind of show how I felt at the time. And then we'll talk about that here.
I think part of this process was engagement of the citizenry. And I just want to make a comment, and I hope you don't take it the wrong way, Mr. LeBeau, but when citizens try to get engaged with boards, but the first comment is, what you provided is wrong. You made a conscious effort to engage with the community and with the government, and you want to find fault. I understand you were a select board member for a long time. You get the process. Just like the planning board people, they get the process. Those of us who don't are looking for help, right? That's what we want. We don't want to be ridiculed or talked down upon. We want assistance, and we want to engage in the community, and we want to be welcomed in.
Yeah, and I think sitting through that debate was really interesting to me, because previous to that debate, there was something else where the group town meeting members were reminded that they only had a certain amount of time to respond or ask questions. And during this process, people got up with pre-written speeches, specifically opposing the planning board change. And I felt that was a little weird, because they went on and on and on. I'm all for letting people speak. Again, we talked about the 3 to 5 minutes. But again, it seemed to me, going back to that feeling that you're not included in something that you didn't know you were supposed to be included in.
Right.
There was a clear feeling that some folks that seemed to be against it got a lot of time, and some folks that were for it got some time.
And then we move the question.
Right.
And the people that were there, and I do want to call it out because you can watch it.
Yeah.
Former select board member, appointed member of a board, appointed member of a board. So and with, like you said, they did come with pre-printed remarks.
Yeah.
So is that just random that you have two former select board members who both are on the same appointed 300th anniversary committee that don't talk to each other and say, well, I didn't realize, you just happen to have
you have a 5-page
speech too? Right? And the other thing is, because this is my perception, maybe I'm wrong, right? But I think perception is okay, right? It can make this observation. So you take two people who, to a lot of people in that room, are well respected and trusted. These are people who used to be the leaders of our community, at least in those positions, still are in some position, but we're on the select board, and their opinion could carry a lot of weight. So for them to come in with pre-planned speeches, how do you think most of the people are going to vote? Even if they came in and said, you know what, I think this might be a good idea. Once they see that, what happens to their vote, right?
Yeah.
And so let's see what actually happened to the vote. I think we probably you can see where this is going, I think.
We will now go to a vote on Article 10. Just to remind everyone, it's the pink sheet that was presented this evening, consistent with the motion provided. It requires a simple majority. All those in favor of Article 10 shall signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The noes have it.
So down in flames I went.
Yeah, it was close, I felt, and the yes or no. One thing I want to bring up real quickly, when we had the referendum and we were standing out in the cold for a number of days, there was a gentleman that came up, we won't name him. He was on the select board, the town meeting, and for many years. And he said, I got off of it, honestly, because I felt like I could never be really heard. There was a group of people that always got their way, and it just became taxing, right? And I think that's what you're witnessing there. I think there is an idea that people think that they're being very open and we're going to have a good debate, but it isn't necessarily that way. I love this process. You went through it. It didn't work. No harm, no foul.
Right.
But, at least we know this process now.
Yeah, I got a ton out of it. Like I said, I really enjoyed the conversations and the debate at the Finance Committee and the Select Board. I know a lot of people aren't comfortable in that setting. I actually really enjoyed it. Even at the town meeting, I enjoyed that,
Yeah.
being able to have the dialogue. So, I'm probably, if there's another issue that pops up that we come across, I definitely want to engage in that process. But, I'll be honest, it wasn't just the one individual when you mentioned that. I think I had 2 or 3 conversations with people, former town meeting member, same kind of piece. And I think that's one thing that I hope that you and I and those who watch the show are going to get more engaged. And we shouldn't feel like we can't be part of that town meeting, and we should engage in the town meeting and encourage more people to be involved in more debate. So that's all the time we have for today's episode. We definitely will be back with another episode because I'm really dying to understand what's happened with this referendum. But for now, if you want to get more hold of us, you can always reach out to us at contact@theunselects.com. But for now, I'm Greg Richards.
And I'm Brian Costello.
And we are the Unselects.
Good night.